meeting of the Lawrence City Council Budget and Finance meeting. My name is Dave Abdu. I am the vice chairman of this committee, and I'm joined this evening by colleagues from my at-large colleague, Anna Levy, as well as I see Council President Mark LaPlante. And there we go. So with that, I want to open with the legal stuff. For the record, to be entered into the record that pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that can gather in one place. This public meeting of the Lawrence City Council for the City of Lawrence, Massachusetts is being conducted via remote participation. There will be no in-person attendance by members of the public, nor will it be permitted, but the public can listen and or view this meeting while in progress by the use of Facebook and YouTube web access sites referenced in the agenda, the published agenda. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearings designated for public comment by use of the web and public access provided by the telephone information provided on the agenda. So with that, I've given the attendance and the legal stuff, and at this time I would ask that we say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States
of America,
to the
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we have minutes, which we do not, so I will dispense with the minutes. We have one new agenda item this week that we will hear, and then of course after the new agenda item, if there are any table matters that members wish to raise, we may do so at that time. So at this time, I would like to, first item up will be item number 3521, the request to expend grant funds, critical services to address COVID-19 services in the amount of $345,665. And that is initiated by and represented this evening by Captain Michael Armano, who is also the Acting Director of Inspectional Services. Mr. Armano is with us this evening, and with that, I would turn the floor over to Mr. Armano and tell us why we're here this evening and set the table for discussion.
Thank you, Councilor Abdu. Good evening, councilors. So this item on the agenda is a bit of housekeeping. Back in March 24th of last year, the City Council authorized the expenditure for two separate awards of $100,000. So the total being $200,000, and that was from the Commonwealth's FY20 Public Health Trust Fund. At that time, these funds were given to the City of Lawrence and other municipalities for use in our response to COVID-19. And they were used in various different ways, from case tracing efforts to supplies, different things that were needed throughout the city. Since that time, there was a couple more increments that was given to the city, totaling $145,665. So the grand total that you just announced, Councilor Abdu, was $345,665. So the housekeeping portion of my request this evening is to get the official acceptance or the authorization to expend the additional $145,665. Just to give you some perspective, the money was, although sponsored through Inspectional Services Department, as you know, the city collectively with all of the departments acts more in a team-like fashion, and everything is billed under a COVID account. This is just one small portion of that account.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. At this time, I will turn it over to my colleagues for questions or motions. There are questions by members. Seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve and send it to the full council with full recommendation.
Thank you. There's been a motion by Councilor at Large Anna Levy to send this to the full council with a favorable recommendation. Is there a second?
Second the motion.
I would note that we've been joined by District D Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez, who has seconded the motion. Thank you, Councilor. Is there discussion regarding this matter? Hearing none, I will ask for a roll call vote. Clerk Halloran?
Okay, thank you. Roll call for document 3521 that was sent to the full council with favorable recommendation. Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez,
Yes.
Councilor Anna Levy,
Yes.
Vice Chair David Abdu,
Thank you. The Vice Chair votes yes for a 3-0 favorable recommendation to the full council next Tuesday, March 2nd.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. Do you have any questions or anyone on your team that's here this evening?
Thank you. Thank you very much. All set.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. With that is the end of new business, and I see quite a few of our colleagues in city government and partners in private sector here this evening. So, councilors, is there a table matter that you wish to take off the table?
Council, Mr. Vice Chair,
Yes, sir. Councilor
I can
Rodriguez.
see, I see people that are here on regard to item 280-220. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Spencer, Jamil, I believe they're here for that. So, on regard to that item, even though I'm not quite ready to vote on that, I would like to open it to the floor, and that way we can get an update on that.
Very good, sir.
So make a motion to take it out of the table matters.
Mr. Vice President, through you, one
Uh,
question. What is the item, please?
280-220.
It's the first table matter, Councilor Levy. Councilor Rodriguez is interested in discussing 1921.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
it said 280-220. I'm sorry if I said 1921.
No, that my bad, Councilor.
Let's do it.
So let the record show.
Yeah, no,
Councilor,
I was looking for the item and I can find it.
it is the second table matter, not the first.
Yes.
That's my fault. Would you like to second that motion, Councilor Levy, to continue the discussion?
Yes, second.
Let the record show correctly that Councilor Rodriguez moved item number 28220, the acceptance of grant MassWorks Infrastructure Improvement Program in the amount of $1,310,000, and it was duly seconded by Councilor Levy to take that off the table. All those in favor, I would request a roll call from the clerk, please.
Roll call for document 28220 that was taken out of table matters. Councilor Anna Levy,
Yes.
Councilor Giovanni Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Vice Chair David Abdu.
Thank you. The Vice Chair votes yes.
Thank you.
This matter is now off the table. I would leave it to my colleagues. How would you like to proceed?
Well, if I might, Mr. Vice Chair, through you.
Councilor Rodriguez, sir, table floor is yours.
For the last 3 weeks, we've been discussing this item. 2 weeks. Yes, we have discussed this item not on this level, but at different levels, different scenarios. One which was me having a discussion with Pedro Soto, which is that the business and economic development. And then eventually having a meeting on site with representation from Lawrence Community Work, which is one of the partners on this grant, and having an opportunity to discuss the design, the previous design and the current design on this project. Also having an opportunity to a possibility of discussing the new terms of the easements that the city of Lawrence have on regard to Island Street and the portion of Island Street that is a private road, and the different benefits and possibilities of this project if happen. Obviously, we have a great discussion in terms of changes that's going to improve. It's going to improve access to the park that is at the end of Island Street, and also the possibility of improving in general the possibility of economic development on the area. It has been great discussions throughout, and I would like to just give them the opportunity for the fairness of the process to open, to give them the floor and explain as to why, that way people up there knows why we are accepting this for $1.3 million.
Well, thank you, Council. We shall do that. I noticed we are joined this evening by Lawrence Community Works Executive Director, I believe I got the title correct, Jess Andors, and several other staff with the acronym LCW after their names. So I think we have some folks here to talk, as well as Pedro Soto, the Planning Director for the city. Appreciate everybody coming on board tonight. And just real quick before I turn it over to you, Director Andors, is I want to thank you all. You know, like Councilor Rodriguez said, you all gave us time between the meetings, and I know individually, because of mass open meeting laws, you know, we met individually, and I individually want to thank you for similar time as you gave Councilor Rodriguez to go over this program and the changes and alterations and what you're trying to do here. So with my appreciation, I want to turn it over to you, Director Andors, to tell us why we're here this evening, and then to Councilor Rodriguez's questions, make your staff as appropriate available. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Councilor Abdu, and all the council members who are here tonight. We really appreciate your willingness to engage with us on this, and it's a pleasure to have conversations with people who are so deeply committed to the city and just care about what's best for it. So we're always, you know, more than willing and happy to have those kinds of conversations, because that's what the mission of LCW is all about. I am going to let Spencer Buchholz, who's the project manager for the Island Parkside project, do, you know, most of the talking for us. But I just did want to lay a little bit of context around this. So we really could not have had the success that we have had in revitalizing parts of the city and some of the housing and older mill buildings without the partnership and leadership of the city in all of the work that we have done. And that extends from, you know, funding support at a minimum, but also thought partnership and help accessing other resources and, you know, planning with us and thinking through what's best and making recommendations around design or process or other things. So we've always deeply appreciated that relationship. And this project is no different, you know, from its inception, from the master planning that we conducted around the whole of Union Crossing, like almost 15 years ago at this point, through the different phases that have been developed, 50 Island Street and the Duck Mill, and now the Island Parkside project on the former Ultimate Windows property site. I think we have created together this shared vision for the revitalization of the East Island and the Mill District, and that area of the city, and thinking about how do we reinvent these amazing, beautiful historic buildings and these properties by the river to create a really vibrant new neighborhood in the city. And so the MassWorks grant that that we're asking the city to accept and hoping that you will is really geared towards furthering that vision of having a vibrant neighborhood with really high quality, climate resilient housing that's going to be affordable to Lawrence families, to working families in Lawrence. And then also supporting the development of what we hope will be a really amazing neighborhood grocery store and additional facilities for the health center and for some of our youth development programming in the city. So it's a project that's designed to be mixed use, to bring a lot of renewed activity to that area and to build on the millions of dollars of investment that the city and LCW and the state and other partners have already put into this space. So we're just really excited about it. We're excited to break ground on the housing portion of it later this year. And I'll just turn it over to Spencer to talk a little bit more about some of the details of the project and speak to some of Councilor Rodriguez's questions and suggestions.
Sure. And this has been, so we've met with most of you all and have had I think that given everybody a chance to kind of have a bigger understanding of what, the island Parkside, the housing component of the project is, with 2 buildings, 40 units each, 100% affordable housing, with 60% AMI as the kind of the highest income level that would be living in those buildings. And as a part of the second phase is also, we partnered with Squash Busters Lawrence to where they're going to be building their squash facilities for their youth after school program as well. And so that's all really is kind of coming together as a mixed use place for healthy and vibrant housing. One of the things I think that's been helpful for us since this process has started, we've been able to kind of refine our thinking a little bit more around the connectivity to the park, which has been a part of the vision of this project since its inception. We've always been really, when we started knocking on doors and talking with folks in the neighborhood about what they wanted to see there, one of the things that was important to people was not only the housing component, which is hugely important, but also, how are we further activating the park and drawing people into it? And these conversations have helped us to kind of think further and further refine that vision. So I don't know if you, Pedro, want to kind of walk through where we have been, and I can also share my screen in a minute to, just thinking about where the MassWorks grant started and where we are now, and can talk about some of the changes and some of the things that are a little bit harder for us to incorporate into the site plan.
And actually, Spencer, just before you do that, I just did want to acknowledge, so that the council knows, we do have several board members and members of LCW in the audience tonight. So Jacobo Olivero, Nancy Torres, and Mariel Silverio are all members of the LCW board. And then we have several volunteers who've been active for years and been part of some of the planning charrettes and other design, very inclusive design processes we've had around this neighborhood, the housing, the other projects, and the whole vision for it. And several folks like Jacoba and Nancy are also abutters to the property and live next door.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also just point out, so Rick Freiberg from TEC and then Brad Busher from Groundwork Lawrence.
Yeah, but this is a city meeting. You can sit here with us.
Marielle, you're on. So they're also have been kind of, TEC is the civil engineers on the project, and Brad and Groundwork have been, we've been working closely with them to develop the the overall connectivity and flow to the park, the continuation of the Spigot River Greenway. And so they'll be able to speak to that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Jess and Spencer. I know that Rick is going to be going over in a little bit more detail, kind of the purpose of the Mass Work grant and some of the projects that have happened in Lawrence with assistance from MassWorks in the past 6 years, and the tremendous work that has gone off the ground because of that funding. So if you recall, we were before you, I was before you a couple of weeks ago, it might be a couple of months now, but to request that the city accept the $1.3 million from MassWork to help improve this area, to build out the infrastructure needed to leverage a lot of the really great things that Jeff mentioned earlier in the development and in Spencer. Through kind of, we came before the committee, and there were some concerns that maybe the best way to describe them are some themes that we felt we could address. Councilor Rodriguez pointed out a few themes, which I'll mention now. And essentially what we were able to do is work with the LCW team, their designers, among other partners and kind of thought leaders in the area to help address some of those concerns, those themes. We weren't able to address all of them. Spencer will go into a little bit more detail, but just as an overview, some of the things that did come up that we wanted to look at a little bit more closely was dedicated parking for the visitors, in addition to the shared parking signage. We want to make sure that the park felt very much public, because it is a public amenity, but we want to make sure that the development that's alongside it didn't confuse residents as they were walking in or driving in, residents of the city and the area, as well as shifting parking on site from north to south on Island Street. We'll get into that in a moment. And also, like Spencer mentioned, greening of the Canal Walkway on the Spigot River Greenway. Excuse me. So that's kind of some of the themes that emerged, and we got working with LCW and the partners really to figure out, well, what can be addressed. Just want to remind everybody, I think when we first started chatting about this, some of these themes, we kind of talked about this as if we were in concept, and in fact, we're actually closer to 75% planned, but there was some wiggle room to be able to address some of these themes. So with that, I'd love to pass it over to Spencer to walk through some of those themes in a little bit more detail.
Sure. I'm gonna just quickly share my screen. So can you all see that? So since the first MassWorks plan was shared, we've made some updates. Like Pedro mentioned, the first thing was the original intention was always to offer shared parking. So the majority of the parking that's on Island Street is being developed is what is required by zoning for the housing and is what is needed for the housing. It has always been our intention that would be able to, a certain amount of it would be able to be shared with park visitors who currently don't have, aren't supposed to be parking, near the park. The dedicated parking for the park is actually over by where the Dye Works building is, to the west of this site here. But we have added 4 spaces to this site plan that would be specifically dedicated to the park. We talked with Councilor Rodriguez about, we can figure out what the ownership structure of those are, and we're open to whatever, but that those would be exclusive for park visitors. There's a potential of adding an additional 5th space as well, but it would require us to lose some of the green space at the entrance to Island Street. As well. The second thing, and this is actually, I think, a really good idea. They're all good ideas, but that we hadn't really thought about is the signage at the entrance. So this is kind of a rendering of what it would look like if you're driving onto Island Street from the bridge off of Canal Street. And here you could see kind of the continuation of the Spigot River Greenway leading to Ferris Park or Ellen Swallows Richards Park. And the signage here at the entrance, because I know there is a concern that it would feel, we don't want this to feel like this is just a private development where nobody can drive in that doesn't live there. And so that this signage here would be the exclusive signage for the park and not mention anything about the housing. We could put signage on the housing itself, but this would be, you know, this is kind of the concept that Groundwork has been working on for the park signage, but that there would be signage welcoming people to the park, both at the entrance to the road here, and then at the far end at the entrance to the park where the parking would be as well. And I think those things will help kind of as people are coming to feel welcomed onto the site. One recommendation that Councilor Rodriguez had, which you know, is a good recommendation, is, you know, how do we create sight lines that go all the way down and potentially shifting the parking from the north here to the south along the building. We kind of shared that this is kind of a challenge for a number of reasons. Like Pedro had mentioned, the construction documents for the housing are actually done. They're at 100% and they've been sent out to bid. Shifting that parking would have a couple of impacts that would be really tough for us to do at this point in the game. One of which, the fire department, we had met with the fire department a number of times, probably like 8 times, to get the site plan for them to be able to approve it. They need to be able to pull onto this walkway here. Their connection to the building is right here, where they would be able to hook up for the water connection. But they also would like to not have you know, other things hindering them from being able to access this side of the building. The other challenge is that there are grade changes, and so shifting this parking would lose a couple of parking spaces on this side, but also it makes it challenging on our main entrance, the accessibility of it, and would require a certain amount of rethinking the actual building, the building layout and where it is, potentially having to shift it south a little bit, or open or lose a little bit of the green space along the canal pathway there. And so I think we would request that, you know, that we not do this piece, because it really is, it would be a really challenging piece that I don't know that we can actually do without really kind of threatening the housing in a certain way at this point in the game. And I think those are kind of the big points for that. I mean, these drawings show a lot of the kind of the connectivity to the park, the Spigot River Greenway circulation, you know, also showing how the whole site plan was developed with the buildings are intentionally bent so that you can see, so we're creating sight lines to draw people further into the park. Again, this is just kind of the circulation where a lot of the pathways on the site. So the MassWorks scope would include both the pathway connections along the canal, the Island Street, the parking, but also pathway connections that go down to the Merrimack River Trail that also connects to the park, and then some roadway improvements that would help with traffic for the Dye Works building and the commercial uses there. And I think those are kind of the main points on that. But so Brad, did you want to kind of share a little bit about your thoughts on the park connections? Sorry.
Before, can I jump in for one moment before
Sure.
Brad
Yep.
gives us a little bit,
Sure,
a
Mr.
little bit
Soto.
more context? Thank you. One thing that I did want to point out is that, you know, in our conversations with Councilor Rodriguez and our partners, you know, the 4 or 5 themes that we've discussed, I think we spent a lot of time on discussing the connectivity kind of at the entrance of the park at Ferris Park, and making sure that the public-private balance is right. That, again, folks that are walking onto the site, running, or, you know, coming in a vehicle, they feel welcomed. And as Brad will mention in a minute, and as Spencer kind of gave us an overview and is alluding to, there are multiple connection points that are being offered, you know, through the development of this project. So I want to highlight that there's multiple connections that we're really excited about at the project. And I would add too that from a planning perspective, this project could have been built more densely. And I know LCW and their commitment to ensuring connectivity to green spaces, as well as just creating an environment that just a higher quality development. They opted to do less units so that, again, the building could be positioned in a way to really provide that scenic view from right, you know, as you're coming down near Methuen Street and Canal, you can clearly see into, you know, the beautiful asset that is Ferris Park. So just wanted to highlight that. And I know, we spent a lot of time on that connectivity piece, but this is just one piece of a very larger kind of scheme to make connections at the park. So with that, please, Brad.
Thank you. This has been a good thing, working with LCW to increase the connectivity between the park and its surrounding context. But I think perhaps more significantly, Ferris Park has always been core to groundwork. You know, the residents of the city brought groundwork to Lawrence in 1996. And that feasibility study highlighted this site, the confluence of the Spigot River and the Merrimack River, as an important park. At the time, the city was planning a gateway project. Across the canal was the old Oxford paper site, the Bolta rubber factory. It was a very different Canal Street. Alignment was totally different. And slowly the city has chipped away at transforming this gateway from a very different place 15, 20 years ago. And working together, we've done something that everybody across the country would hold up as a great model for redevelopment. So I'm excited because this project completes the park. It creates that connection that we really need between its surrounding context and the site. We worked with LCW to widen the Spigot River Greenway as it goes along the canal. That was really important as a long-term goal, and we're going to install signage that has been in the design phase for a while, and that's exciting too. And they're really stepping up and creating connection paths between the park they're creating, and the development they're creating, and the site itself. So this is a good project, and we're excited to be part of the team.
Okay. Jess, is there others in the team that you wanted to address, or did anyone else before I turn it over to my colleagues? Questions?
Yes, Councilor Abdu.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Spencer, go ahead.
I just know that Rick from TEC wanted to just add a little pieces from their perspective too.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Freiberg from TEC, and we've been really lucky. We're a civil engineering firm, and we've been really lucky to be part of the redevelopment of this area for, I think, probably closing in on 13 or 14 years or so since some of the early concept work. But also, as it relates to this project, we worked closely with Pedro and with city staff to secure this grant for the city. Our company has worked on about and successfully obtained about 20 different MassWorks grants throughout the Commonwealth. So we're really well versed in what the grants are used for, how they've been a really successful economic development tool for the state, and how they really benefit the communities that apply for them and win them. And so I just wanted to shed a little bit of light on what the purpose of the grant is, because ultimately we're in front of this committee seeking a recommendation to accept the funding. And so I just wanted to come back to a little bit to what the funding is. And so what is MassWorks, right? So MassWorks is a 100% state funding eligible grant program. There's no requirement for local match, so there's no burden to local taxpayers. 100% of the project funds can come directly from the state. But because of the fact that there's no local match required, it's a very competitive process to win a MassWorks grant. This year, for example, I believe over 100 municipalities applied for MassWorks grants, and I think 35 communities received MassWorks grants. So only about a third of the communities who applied were successful in obtaining the funding. And Lawrence is one of those 35 communities that received the funding. And I think, for a number of reasons. And so number one, sort of the goals of the program really are twofold. They are about job creation, and they're about the production of housing units. And the production of housing units has really come more to the forefront recently in the MassWorks program, as the governor has identified sort of a potential shortfall in housing as we look ahead at population projections. So those are the two things that the state usually looks at closely in terms of criteria that they evaluate projects against. But importantly, the funding can only be used for infrastructure, right? So it's not a check to the developer or anything like that. It's infrastructure work that's administered by the municipality. So in this case, the city controls all of the funding for the project, and it can only be spent on infrastructure work. So things like improving parking and access and utilities, sidewalk connections, path connections, those sorts of things are eligible for funding. But it's different than other state programs in that it's not the same as, like, maybe you are aware of the trails and parks grants that exist from the state. This is truly an economic development tool by the state. So to be eligible for MassWorks funding, not only do you have to have these needs for infrastructure, but also a partnering development that benefits from them. And so in this case, there are really two, it's sort of a 2-for-1, right? There's the Island Parkside project, which proposes 80 residential units, and the proposed commercial development of the Dye Works property. So, and they both need the same piece of infrastructure, which is an improved end of Island Street, right? So from the state's perspective, from MassWorks' perspective, it's a bit of a 2-for-1 opportunity here. The second is that because it includes both housing and job creation, that also elevates the project in terms of MassWorks' view of it. It's not one or the other. This one infrastructure project actually benefits both. And as part of the application process, we had to estimate jobs created, and we had to estimate housing units, and the housing units are easy. That's 80 housing units. But the project also projects to create 75 jobs that are permanent jobs, and 135 construction jobs that are required to build out the projects. So the state also considers that information. And then I think, and then the third piece is that, both of these projects really need this infrastructure to happen. So this is sort of the missing piece to the puzzle. And this is where the MassWorks program really shines. They identify projects where there's just this piece of infrastructure that's missing that allows these, wonderful redevelopment transformative projects to happen. And that is exactly the case here, where both of these projects really need these improvements in place to make the project successful. So those are the three criteria: the sort of the 2-for-1 opportunity, the fact that it checks both the housing box, the job creation box, and the fact that there's this missing piece of public infrastructure. Those are the three things that make the project really attractive to MassWorks, and it's why I think a lot of the reason why Lawrence was really considered closely for the grant But I think what puts Lawrence over the top, and it's probably the ultimate reason why Lawrence is one of the 35% or so that was an award recipient, is the track record that the city has and the track record that the shareholders have. I think, you know, Jess and Spencer and Brad really outlined it very well when they were talking about the success and the reinvestment in this part of the city. Especially, there's been quite a bit of state investment in this part, but the state has been able to track that reinvestment, or the state's been able to track their investments and tie them directly to transformative development projects that have happened. You know, Duck Mill, Union Crossing, a brand new Canal Street, right? The bridge that goes over the North Canal that provided a second means of egress on and off the island that was important for emergency vehicle access. So hand in hand with the transformative development work all along really has been this component of state funding to help with the infrastructure. And this is really nothing new for the city, because this is what's been happening here, especially on the island for about 10 years or so. It's really a continuation of that, and the state has been excited to see the progress that's happened here, and it's why they're continued to be excited to invest in it. And so, you know, ultimately the project obviously has garnered a lot of support, right? The application was signed by Mayor Rivera. It included a letter from the state delegation in support of the project. It's received approvals from numerous city boards, including Conservation Commission and Planning Board, who do a review of the design for the project. And that whole roadway has taken us to a point now where we've successfully worked closely with the city to obtain this grant and are on the brink of being able to put this infrastructure in place. And we're fortunate to be here in front of you tonight, seeking your endorsement of the funding and hoping that you'll recommend in favor of accepting the funds. So with that, I'll close and turn it back over, and we look forward to answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freiberg. Mr. Soto, do you have anything further?
Thank you, Councilor Abdu. No, I would just add that as Rick mentioned, the planning department and our staff, we manage the funding that comes through any MassWorks program and a lot of the grants that come through planning. So in the past year, I've been lucky enough to be part of two separate projects, ending or closing out about $7 million worth of MassWorks grant, Merrimack East and West, as well as taking in $4 million from MassWorks for the Riverwalk project. So every month we're reporting out to MassWorks, getting reimbursements, as well as working with TC and our engineering department to make sure that any issues, any punch list items that need to be resolved out on the street, we're there and supporting. And I have been, I touch base with folks over at MassWorks pretty frequently, and they did. I just wanted to point out that we're at a place right now, kind of in the life of the project, where all the administrative changes for the grant, we need to, I just want to emphasize that we're really close to just starting the project, right? So a decision tonight would be really favorable. It wouldn't delay anything else any further on the project. So I think there are some changes. I think we're really close on getting exactly where we need to be in terms of themes and changes and suggestions. I think we're really close on that. Perhaps if there are still concerns, we could address those separately and in good faith that we'll get through and make sure that we get what we need. But I just want to emphasize kind of where we are in the life of the contract. It's really important to for us to have a favorable recommendation tonight in order to not delay any other kind of administrative processes for the grant. So with that, I end my comments there.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. At this time, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues, either Mr. Rodriguez for follow-up. Mr. Rodriguez, a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me just share my screen very quick. All right, everybody can see this?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, I mean, through you, Mr. Vice Chair. Again, this is the project that is being proposed. A couple of things that I need to clarify. Yes, we're not delaying the process, the project. We are doing what we're supposed to do, which is the process that we following tonight and a month ago. Essentially, this is not a delaying of the process or the project. This is the job that we were elected to do. And asking questions with the concerns. It's for the benefit of a city property, which is the park. So as you can see here, this area right here, this is the park in question, So most of the concern that we have, or that I have, it was in regard to people, drivers coming into the park and be able to go to the park without having any type of confusion. That this park right here is a public park that we accept 4.5 years ago. So when I asked the question a month ago that on this level, Mr. Soto, who this project was going to serve, essentially, his answer was to serve the apartments that are going to be built. That we are completely in favor of the project. We're just not in favor of how we are communicating, or people are communicating from this point all the way to be able to use the park. We don't want to create a dead zone on this area, which people don't know that the park belongs to the city. It's a public entity. And that was most of the questions. Based on that, that was most of the question I have. As part of Spencer mentioned before, one of the questions I have, it was basically having these parking spaces that are here facing up the building. So going on this direction instead of that direction as is. Right now they're going north, so I was looking to see the possibility of having them facing south. So with the benefit of that was basically to have people or the traffic flow going instead of just curving, going straight into the parking lot, obviously with traffic coming and the bump up going on this direction, south instead of north. It will help the visibility of the park. It will help the traffic flow of people coming from any direction from the city that don't necessarily know about the park or about the project, and they just continue going towards the park and not having that confusion whether or not the park belongs to the city or belongs to the project. That was the whole concern. With that said, we proposed a couple of changes which LCW have worked to resolve a few of them. And one of them was, as they mentioned, dedicated parking spaces. We also discussed the possibility of rewarding the actual easement, because as you probably know, this is Island Street right here at the end. This is the existing current Island Street, this right here. And that piece of the road is private from this point going all the way, as you can see here. We didn't know that before. I didn't know that before, that this section of Island Street was a private road. And it is important to say as well that with this $1.3 million, we essentially building out this parking lot and some of these improvements, and as well as the pathway that is going to connect the greenway to the park. So that was some of the concern as it was discussed between me and Pedro and Lawrence Community Work, that this area right here, this curving area that is going to be built up with these funds are going to be able to help the development of the new supermarket that is coming up on this area. I am in favor, 100% in favor of the housing component of the project. I am very concerned about the actual communication from this point. Anybody driving to the park from this point to the actual site, that could create some confusion. And we have before accept grants or make some development or helping out on some development that actually create some type of confusion for some of the public properties that we have in the city, and we don't want that to happen here. Essentially, the Lawrence Community Work in combination with Groundwork Lawrence have developed a great sign that, as you can see here, this sign right here want to just allow people to read that there is a park at the end of the road, which it's very important to the project. To be honest with you, I am happy with the project, but still I think that some changes could be made to help people to understand that even though there is a great project, there is a private project here, we have an access easement that we can use this area right here to be able to get to the park and be able to enjoy the park. The last thing I want to see is the park just being used by people living in these projects and the project, or just people that knows about the park. I would like people to know that there is a park there and we have access to it. Anybody in the city of Lawrence. And that was my concern. And that's going to still be my concern. But as I said at the beginning of the discussion, for the fairness of the process, I will allow the conversation to continue because I understand that this $1.3 million grant, even though the city have no is not putting any money on it, we got to be clear that this is important for the project. But the most important thing that we have in the entire project, we got to make sure that for me as a councilor is the park, because the park is a public entity that we need to protect, and I'm very sure that Lawrence Community Work will do that. Not a question asked. I'm not concerned about that, but I'm more concerned about people that not necessarily will have a doubt about the existence of this beautiful park that Lawrence Community Work will protect, and Groundwork Lawrence have actually built up, and we accept this park 4.5 years ago. So that was those were my concerns, and I hope that we can continue this conversation about how we can improve the assets, because even though I'm not going to be in the middle of the process to continue this project to happen, but I would like the other councilors to be aware that there is other or better way to communicate for people from around the city, for them to communicate with the park and for them to understand that there is a park at the end of the road. And that's my whole concern. With that said, Mr. Vice Chair, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rodriguez. Councilor Levy or Councilor Plant, does anyone else have any questions for either Lawrence Community Works, Mr. Soto, what's one on here?
Yes, Mr. Vice President. Just
Council Levy?
Yeah, just only a comment. So I agree with some of the things that Councilor Rodriguez said regarding, the communication between the building, the park, the city, the community. So for me, I saw that the park was like practically a private park belong to the new building that is going to be built over there. So practically we own the park, and it's going to be like something that is something like for the community, and we need to look the way of how we're going to attract, the community and use also the park and feel like this is something that is not a private park, it's a community park for everybody to be used. I have another concern also is regarding the maintenance between the park and also the area that is practically a common area between the building that's, and the park. Who's going to be taking care of all of this piece? I don't know if something is being thinking on that, on how this going to be the maintenance that we're going to provide. That sometimes we build something and later everything is leave to whoever, and nobody is responsible for keeping in maintenance of all of these places in here. I think that is a good project. Is getting from the 495 and getting through all of this. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to give a better view for the city of Lawrence. This great city, and that's we really need some kind of instruction and principle when you get in here that people can get a better view on how this city looks like. But this is part of the things that, yes, I think that we should work a little bit more. That entry for the area that doesn't look like a private area for other people who would like to go to and use the playground or the area for that we are creating in there.
Thank you, Councilor Levy. With that, before I go on any further, I believe Ms. Jessica Andors from Lawrence Community Works wanted to comment on those comments made thus far. With that, Ms. Andors, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor. I just wanted to say to both Councilor Levy and Councilor Rodriguez is that we fully share and deeply appreciate those concerns, and that has been a real priority for us in this project from the beginning. In fact, when we first bought the property and started working with an architect team that we had worked with many times in the past on different projects that we had done, we were really unhappy with their designs because they did not take into consideration this major piece of the vision we had, which was to open up access to the park. And I think, one of the things that we've really felt, and I think Groundwork has shared this feeling as well, is that, we have this beautiful urban wild that the city and Groundwork have invested so much in at the end of the island. And then we've had this blighted piece of property sitting there in front of it that's really blocked access and made it feel unsafe and inaccessible. And so the whole purpose of this project and the sort of vision that we were following in creating this and in designing it was about opening up access to the park and making it, much more accessible to community residents from all over the city. And that's why we let that first architect team go, actually, and got a new architect team on board that shared that vision. And, you see that in everything from the circulation pathways that they've created to the actual line of the buildings that Spencer was going over, with the view sheds pointing towards the park, with the fact that we are creating some other uses on our adjacent site that will complement the more passive recreational space at the Ellen Swallow Richards Park. And I do just want to emphasize that I feel like we all need to stop calling it the Ferris Park and start calling it the Ellen Swallow Richards Park, as that's going to be the official name. And it honors a really important piece of history of Lawrence, history at that end of the island, and something that really broke ground nationally scientifically. We absolutely share those concerns, and that is why we've designed this project with the maximum amount of design elements that we could possibly afford, that open up that access and help draw people in and magnify the effect of the greenway, and the ability of residents from all over to enjoy that beautiful natural environment at the end of the island.
Well, thank you for that. I would, Spencer, go ahead, Mr. Buckholz, rather.
Sorry. Mr. Buckholz is my father.
He would want me to call on you.
And I think the other piece, is just, I do want to call attention to the fact that this has come out of this, is that, putting the signage at the entrance to Island Street, where I'll show again, and I know that the intention of this signage here is to, and I don't know if this could say something like "Welcome to City of Lawrence, Ellen Swallow Richards Park, Ferris Park," but we'll stick with Ellen Swallow Richards for now, so that it's drawn, because I agree. I think it's going to be hard no matter what's here. You're going to see a bunch of cars, but bringing the park signage out to the main street is, in my opinion, makes a big difference as far as the first thing people are going to see. They're going to see this tree-lined street. They're going to see the Spicket River Greenway continuation. They will see the housing, but also like a welcome, welcome to City of Lawrence, the park, so that it draws people in. And so I do want to just call attention to that. I think as far as maintenance is concerned, Councillor Levy, right now, Lawrence Community Works would be responsible for the maintenance of this portion of, the part that's on our site. The city is currently, they maintain the park at the end, but it's a fairly low maintenance park because it was designed that way to be, an urban wild where the native plants are somewhat kind of grow naturally and don't need to be mowed or kept up as regularly as a regular park does. But we would be maintaining this portion of the site.
I have one question. May I?
Yes, Councilor Levy, please.
That is the only way that we can have the entry to the buildings and also through the park, or we can be able to study the way on how we can get another entryway. At least maybe when you coming from, what is the? So because I only see one entryway, it's not another way that maybe we should cut a little bit, like it's, in the middle, and maybe that is going to be more focused that people can go through the park.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
So you can see on this this site plan here. So there are currently two entrances to the park. One is on the north side along the canal. So this walkway would be improved. The other is on the Merrimack River pathway, and there is currently no walking trail to get down to there. So park visitors are supposed to park in this parking lot here and then access the park this way. think that's technically the official entrance to the park, but there is no walking pathway down from Island Street and Canal Street.
Okay. I'm not talking about the entry through the side like you are pointing me right now. I'm just talking about the entry through Island Street.
Over here, through the top.
Yes.
This entrance here, or this entrance here?
I can see just only one entry practically to that area.
Yes, that's correct. There's just one
There's
entrance.
no another way that we can cut, like on the other corner on Island Street, like it's, you know, if you go through, well, it's from the left to the right, you know, on that corner in there. So instead of just getting that way, that maybe we can open another entry that is a short way to go to the park.
Spencer, I can just jump in. There is a third entrance to the park that's
I don't know
always.
if you guys can see it. But like here.
Sorry.
Oh, from Marston Street. From Marston Street?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. There's when the park was in the design phase, we really felt it was important to have a third entrance to the site from what was then Canal Street and the Canal Street Bridge over the Spigot River, which is now a park named after a veteran. That bridge is still in the plan and in the plans. And you're right, it will provide excellent connectivity to the Prospect Hill neighborhood. Yes. And the path that the city is renovating to bring people down from High Street to Prospect, as well as that connection dates back to some of the planning that was discussed earlier when the city was in the design phase of bringing that new bridge over the Spigot River. It's still in play, and as Pedro will tell you, we're working with the canal owner, Central Rivers Power, to make that connection happen. It's that way, then you can walk down the canal on both sides and loop around. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, you answered a little bit, but I think so. Yes, this is the concept that I'm being trying to look. You know, that instead of having like we have to go all the way down and then to get instincts inside that the building. So we have to go down and then go back again.
Yeah.
Go to the end of the park and the buildings, and so see we had like a shortcuts. You know, getting from Marston and Prospect Street and all of those places directly to, I think that it's going to short, you know, and make it more visible and more easy for the public or you know, and the community to know that this is something that is being in there and being for the use of everybody. Yeah.
And when we priced it originally, that bridge, it was $750,000, and the total park project was something around 1.5, 1.7. So it was not very feasible, but we are looking at lighter fiberglass reinforced bridges that are appropriate for pedestrians to make that connection happen.
Thank you.
You all set, Councilor Levy?
Yes, I'm okay. Yes.
Thank you. I would note that I believe Mr. Soto from the city had a question or a comment. Mr. Soto, please.
Thank you, Councilor Abdu. I just want to highlight a few other things. Spencer mentioned earlier he had that graphic that showed the signage. I did also want to mention that we did throw out the idea or support the idea of adding an additional sign coming off of the bridge right in front when you enter, and then there'll be, you know, the the other sign would be on the left side. So yeah, I think we share the concern that Councilor Rodriguez has brought up. Again, kind of that confusion that could come up at developments that have or are adjacent to public amenities like parks. So that public-private kind of vibe is something that we're really trying to skew more private. So did want to mention that. I don't know, Spencer, if you have that up or have it available to share. The other thing is, I think that there are a lot of really great ideas have come up in the past, month that we've been discussing this matter. And from a very practical perspective, I think it may be that, the request some of the requests may be outside of the scope of the project and funding. And we'd love, in the planning department, a lot of the grants, we propose coming out of the planning department. So we're more than happy to partner with, any of the counselors here in this committee or any others in any district to look at opportunities that will serve the district and increase access. I know that there were a few that were mentioned, but yeah, just simply that. I mean, we're committed to looking at other public resources and grant opportunities to help advance access to public amenities like parks. So if we can't get it done here, I'm confident that we can find other sources to improve other areas that that councilors may want to improve. The third thing that I would say, and last, is it's a tight balance here, right? So I'm trying to be very practical, and I know that the MassWorks grant, Lawrence was awarded this grant on its merits, right? So we submitted an application and they weighed everything out of the 35 and we got really high marks and we were awarded just based on the proposal. There are certainly changes within our scope that we can accommodate here, but I worry that there could be some changes that MassWorks may deem kind of a really big material change that they may have an issue with because the scope was what it was as it was being proposed. And I know that this is a really critical piece. This piece of funding is critical, to unlock the 80 units of housing, as well as a Latin American supermarket that is in the middle of a food desert. So there's so many other amenities that are coming by virtue of us getting this funding to do this work. So I don't want us to lose sight of, yes, it is a very important connection. I think we're working to improve that. But I worry that it may compromise, the funding itself if we deviate too much and create what we call like a material change, where MassWorks says, hey, you proposed this, and now you're saying you're doing this. And I just worry about that. And at the end of the day, I'm the one relaying and having conversations with our partners over at the state. And each step of the way, I just becoming informing them of where we are and administratively and getting this approved. So that's kind of front of mind for me. But again, you have our commitment to find other sources if they're appropriate for other changes. But I just want to mention that as and offer that to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Are there more questions from councilors or motions?
Yes, I have another question, Mr. Vice President.
Councilor Levy, please.
Do we have the line to accept this grant?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
If we have any deadline to accept this grant?
A deadline?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Soto, could you answer that question? Is there a deadline to this grant? To accept?
My last update to MassWorks was last week, and they asked where it was, and I told them that we're going to be here tonight. And I wouldn't say there's a deadline per se, but we do have a report that has to be done by March 31st. the state level, it has to be done kind of for our quarterly report. And I can't really, I'd love to be in a position to report that, everything administratively was completed on time as far as acceptance. But I think the more important kind of timelines are kind of at LCW, and perhaps Jess or Spencer can speak to those. I know that there's some really important tax, I'm forgetting the term here, but there's other funding attached to the project that if this isn't kind of taken care of, perhaps it would compromise other funding sources for LCW. So I don't know if anyone from LCW would want to comment on that, but that would be my biggest worry. I think administratively we can work things out with the state, but I'd be concerned with the financial kind of the negative impacts it might have. Spencer or Jess?
I'll let Spencer speak to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so we're aiming to have a construction closing for the housing for phase 1, which is on the Island Street, in June. And so doing the roadway and the utility connections that are a part of the MassWorks grant need to be done kind of at that same time. So I know that it does take a certain amount of time once the contract is signed, the design documents are done, and then they're sent out to bid. The MassWorks bid process, because it's a public bid, is a little bit of a longer process, which I know Rick could speak to that, but I am a little bit concerned that, if the MassWorks grant doesn't get accepted rather soon, that it could push our ability to start the housing project. And like Pedro said, we're on a pretty tight deadline because the housing is funded through low-income housing tax credits, which do have a drop dead date where we go out and we sell those tax credits to investors, but the building has to be fully occupied by a certain date. And if not, we take a hit on both from the investor, and then if we don't by a certain year end, it becomes a big financial hit that could kill the project. And so I would say I would encourage us for it to be accepted sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Mr. Buckholz.
Yeah, could I add to that, please?
Mr. Harden, please.
Yeah. So I want to reinforce what Spencer said. The MassWorks grant is a critical piece of the whole financing structure of the project. And I don't believe that the state will allow the project to move forward if there's a question as to whether the city is going to accept the MassWorks grant or not, because it is a source of funding that aids in the development of the whole project. And those all need to be committed before we can move forward with the project. And so it creates this pretty severe snowball effect on, how the project moves forward, and, time delays, as Spencer said, potentially have a negative impact on the primary funding source for the creation of the housing. I'd also like to just go back to some of the things that Jess was saying a little bit earlier about the design of the project. And, I really want to reinforce, how much LCW put into specifically creating a better pathway to the park when we were in the design process of this. We held multiple charrettes with, community people, and they all had a concern and were in favor of doing this. As Jess said, we, wound up firing our first architect because the project that they had designed just really was not what we wanted at all. And we've deliberately kept the project smaller, that we're only building about half the number of units that we could actually build on this site by right. And it's specifically because we wanted there to be better access to this park for everybody in Lawrence. you know, as the drawings that Spencer showed, you know, I thought were very clear. You know, there's this triangle effect where, you know, people either at the north or on the south side of the site, you know, have much better visibility, you know, to the park, whereas up until a year ago, there was virtually none. You know, I mean, if you were traveling on Marston Street or Canal Street, or even on Island Street, you would really have no idea that that park was there. What you saw was a bunch of industrial buildings that were in really decrepit condition, and nobody visited the park. You know, and what we and our core goal on this was, you know, to create the additional housing, but also to open up the possibility of people being able to see and visit this park, because we thought it was such a great asset. You know, so the sight lines to Canal Street, from Canal Street, were incredibly important in the design of the buildings and in the layout of the park. The layout of the housing project. We deliberately moved all of our buildings back a bit so that we could widen the pathway that exists along the canal, you know, so that people would be drawn more towards the park and, you know, want to walk down that area. As you know, as Brad said, we've all talked about the potential of doing crossing on over the canal to improve the access, you know, to the park, but you know, that's largely out of our control. It's not on our land. It's, you know, it involves third-party ownership of the canals and what is probably going to be a fairly considerable expense, you know, to create it. But we're absolutely committed to working on doing that more. So I just want that to be all taken into consideration when you know, you're considering whether to accept this funding or not. The consequences to the project as a whole could be fairly severe. And as much as, you know, there are probably, you know, things that could be done a little differently. We explored a lot of different options in terms of the parking layout and, you know, the impact on the project as a whole and the access to the park. And the bottom line was really that no matter how we laid out the parking on that north side, it's going to look like a parking lot. There's really just no two ways about it. And so, you know, pulling into that area was more a question of, okay, how do we make sure that this is seen as, you know, the entrance to the park and not just the entrance to the housing? And, you know, that's partly what led to the widening of the pathway along the canal, you know, the signage that we intend to install there. And, you know, and Councilor Rodriguez had some, you know, had some great comments that we took into consideration. You know, we tried to soften the curve into the entrance, you know, to the parking area and the roadways, so that it was, you know, a bit more gradual than sudden and a bit more inviting. And we were able to create some dedicated parking down at the end, which, you know, we also thought was great. But the biggest impact I think we have on this is that the project itself creates an immensely more inviting environment to the park itself, you know, versus what currently exists. And, you know, and that was our goal from the very beginning. You know, there will certainly need to be some more public effort, because no matter how you slice it, the park is at an odd location, you know, and no matter what is done on the industrial site, the park is still at the end of a dead-end street. And that, you know, always creates a little bit of a challenge in terms of bringing the public down there, because there isn't any natural traffic flow, you know, past it. Our hope is that, you know, simply by some word of mouth, the fact that, you know, there will ultimately be 80 units, you know, down there, and a certain amount of traffic circulation through that area, you know, and the fact that there is also going to be a commercial component to the second phase, which we haven't really discussed, you know, much, but it's a youth program that's going to be, you know, very active down there and bringing kids on a constant basis, you know, down there. That will all help spread the word you know, about this park, because, you know, all of that activity directly borders it.
Thank you, Mr. Harden.
So yeah, I'm rambling on, but
Thank you, sir.
you're welcome.
I would also note, besides the people that have spoken this evening, and I think we've had quite a discussion here, that in the chat, public chat for everyone to see, I would direct people's attention to, thank you for the comments by Ms. Pina, Ms. Disla, and Ms. Estevez. You can find those in the chat on the right if you click the button for those desiring more testimony, in this case written. So with that, I would ask my colleagues if they have any further questions or motions this evening.
I would like to make a motion to send it to the full council as a committee report, no recommendation, pending the language of that modification of the easement going through Island Street that need to be worked out with the city solicitors.
There is a motion by Mr. Rodriguez to send this up to the full council as a committee report, contingent upon language with respect to the easement. Is there a second?
He said with recommendation or without recommendation?
Without recommendation.
Without a recommendation as a committee report.
Second.
Just to clarify, but that way members of the public watching us and the members of the Lawrence community work, the meaning of the no recommendation doesn't mean that it's a negative recommendation. It means that we're going to accept it as a committee report, and then the full council will be able to discuss this further if they want to.
Thank you. So motion has been made by Mr. Rodriguez. It's been seconded by Ms. Levy. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, I would ask the clerk for a roll call vote, please.
Okay, roll call.
Yes, please.
Okay. Roll call. Councillor Anna Levy,
Yes.
Councillor Giovanni Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Vice Chair David Abdu.
The vice chair votes yes for unanimous to send this up to the full council. I would note that the next full council meeting is next Tuesday, March the 2nd. And I want to thank everyone here this evening. But before I let you all go, I also want to note that we were joined earlier in this meeting, though she has declined to speak, as she is taking this all in, as City Councilor at Large, Selena Reyes. So I want to thank Councilor Reyes for joining us as well.
Mr. Vice Chair, I wanted to just clarify one little portion of the motion
Sure.
in terms of the language that is going to be worked out on the easement. Currently, the city of Lawrence have an easement going through Island Street, and that easement is an access easement. I want to make sure that since we have parking spaces that are exclusive for the users of the exclusive use of the park, that the easement wording include the not just access, but vehicle access as well. Since we have a pedestrian, we have exclusive parking on that location.
Thank you, sir. Clerk, did you get that?
No, I couldn't understand the last part. I'm sorry.
Essentially, that since we have exclusive on this design, we have exclusive parking spaces dedicated to the park. The easement need to be reworded to include traffic access, not just assets,
okay.
as it is right now.
Access. Okay. Okay.
This is a great project.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we will see you next Tuesday evening at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilors, are there other items on the table that you wish to take off the table? I will entertain motions to that effect, or any other motions you may have.
You say so many thank you that I was about to leave.
Don't leave, then we can't adjourn. We need a quorum to adjourn. We'll be stuck here.
I know. Motion to adjourn.
There is a motion. There is a motion to adjourn, and it is seconded. Clerk Maria, I would ask you if you would to please take the roll.
Roll call to adjourn at 8:29. Counselor Anna Levy,
Yes.
Counselor Giovanni Rodriguez,
Yes.
and Vice Chair David Abdu.
Thank you. The Vice Chair votes yes. Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting, and we'll see you next Tuesday evening.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.